tenderloin roulade with a mushroom soup, a 3-cheese mac and cheese, some sauteed broccoli / broccolini. I've got a little bit of both, and some homemade sourdough bread. So let's start by getting our sourdough bread in our Dutch oven and baking. I'm going to flip this guy out. There. And give it a nice little rub on here. And now this is our traditional sourdough loaf that I kind of was really tired, so I just mixed the the proofing time. And I will say, so I like started proofing it, and then I was like, I don't want to shape it up, so I popped back in the fridge, and then I reshaped it up in the morning after I let it warm up. So if it messes up, it's not because of that. It's because I asked my husband to do the stretch and folds while I was at soccer, and that would be the reason why it doesn't turn out. Not anything to do with me. I'm infallible. Okay, we'll just do our basic little score here, but really simple. The one we made up yesterday turned out beautiful, so I expect this one to do the exact same. We've got our Dutch oven nice and toasty. We're going to slide this guy in there. And again, this is just a simple, basic sourdough loaf. And put my lid on. And we're going to go pop this in the oven at 500 for 20 minutes. Then we'll take the lid off and bring the oven temperature down to 450 and bake at 450 for 20 minutes. There we go. Slide that guy in there. And then we'll set our timer here for 20 minutes. Timer is set. Making sure the other day I forgot. And let's get started on our roulade. That way we can sear it off and we'll have it ready in the pan. And we're going to get ready for our mac and cheese as well. So I'm going to get my noodles. Once I get to a good boil, which we're actually pretty much there, I'm going to drop my noodles in to boil them up for our mac and cheese. And I'm using the cool little corkscrew noodles because, again, they're my favorite. Now, I don't need a whole box because that would give us a lot of mac and cheese. So I'm just going to use about half the box, which will give us a good amount of mac and cheese. Noodles expand. I think that's always people's biggest mistake. They always make way more noodles than they need. So let's give this a good stir. We'll let those boil up. And then before I fillet my meat, let's get some of our filling, our roulade. So our roulade, we're going to kind of fillet our pork tenderloin out. Then we're going to fill it up with some lovely kind of herbs, butter, garlic, and chopped up spinach to be the filling in there. But we're going to saute that off. So let me get our garlic diced up and ready to saute. A little bit of some onions in there as well for our base. And then we have a good amount of seasoning. We have 2 pork tenderloins. They're about 1 pound each. So I'm going to do a good amount of my little seasoning here for this. Let's get our butter kind of melting on here to start with. And I'm going to put some butter in there, and then we will add a little bit of extra butter into the base of it. So because we want a good amount of butter to flavor up the pork tenderloins, and we have 2 of them, I'm going to use 4 tablespoons.
Can you explain what a pork roulade is?
So essentially, we are going to take a pork tenderloin and we're going to fillet it out to where we've got a kind of a sheet of meat. We're going to put our herby and spinach mixture in it, and then we're going to roll it up. So roulade is just simply like to roll it up, and I'll tie it, and then we'll sear it off in our pan, and then we'll finish baking it. And so it will be like a lovely pork tenderloin that's stuffed with, some delicious flavors inside. So we've got our pork tenderloins there, and we will fillet them out in just a second for it. So it's just a really simple way to take a nice, cheap piece of meat, like pork tenderloins, a fairly cheap piece of meat, and jazz it up a little bit. Give it a bit more flavor in there, and makes it pretty delicious. So I'm going to mince up my onions so we can get those caramelizing. Then we will mince up our garlic and get that in there as well. And then I've got some fresh herbs and some spinach that we'll mince up as well. And then we'll get those kind of cooking. A lot of times you can stuff your roulade with a lot of different things. I'm keeping it really simple today with just fresh herbs and spinach. The spinach really will just give you a bit more of that green look, but all you'll really taste is the herbs on there because they'll just be really bright and wonderful. But you can use mushrooms, tomatoes, sun-dried tomatoes, nuts, cheeses. So many different things can be filled up inside. So let's get this going. I'm going to kind of mince up my onions smaller. So again, that we have little bits of onion throughout. I don't want my mixture to be super chunky because that just makes it a little bit tougher to roll up. There. Okay, so pretty good size mince on it.
You get this question a lot. How do you cut onions without crying?
My trick is actually I keep my onions in the refrigerator. And when onions are cold, they don't release their like onion juicy gas out as much. And so it kind of,
Is that the technical term?
yes, it is very technical, guys. That is the scientific way. I should know, I'm a doctor. But that's the only way that I can justify it, because whenever I use a room temperature onion or one that has been sitting out, my eyes water all the time. But there's just something with that, being cold. They used to say, oh, if you have water out, the liquid will naturally go to water because that's why it goes to your eyes. But that doesn't work. So I think it's just because they're cold. And when they're cold, they're less likely to produce the vapor up into your eyes. So let's get these guys going here. And then I'm going to mince up my garlic here. I have several good-sized cloves of garlic. We're going to mince it up nice and small, and we'll throw it in with our onions here in a little bit once our onions have got a nice caramelization on it. And then we are going to mince up some spinach and fresh herbs. And for my fresh herbs today, we are going to use thyme, oregano, sage, rosemary, and some black pepper, of course. But just nice, wonderful, fresh deliciousness that I think will go really well with our dish today. But really playing in the herby side to it. And then we'll get our garlic minced up nice and lovely. And
You got a question? You have your doctorate?
I do. I have it in nothing like super exciting, just education. That would be my undergrad. Educational leadership and policy. So I have lots of degrees, and I always sit there. And I took a break. When I was pregnant with my fourth, I decided to kind of step back from teaching. But I was a teacher, worked at the university, and I kind of loved it. But I worked with both young children with disabilities as well as undergraduate and graduate students. And I would, train them on how to work with children, how to develop curriculum, implement their practicums and whatnot. And I really enjoyed it. And then I also worked with international students, and I loved it. But when I got pregnant with Teddy, I decided that I wanted to spend a little bit of time at home with my kids because I had worked through my first three. And then Jack came along and kind of reset the timeline. So I've just been home with them because it's been really nice and the opportunity presented itself. And I will say it has worked out well for our family because with kids and sports, and I really can't wait until my oldest can drive because that will be so much easier because I feel like we're chauffeurs now, just taking kids everywhere, whatnot. But that's there. But I did love teaching and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. Dedicated a lot of my life to that. Okay, our onions are getting a lovely kind of caramelization on there. And we're going to add in our garlic here. We'll let that saute for a second. Again, we have probably 2 or so tablespoons of freshly minced garlic going in here. You know, about 1 per tenderloin. I'll let that kind of caramelize up. It smells wonderful. But this is going to really flavor our pork tenderloin from the inside out, which is going to be so delicious because it's going to really seal in those flavors. And then we've got some spinach that we're going to chop up and add in there. So just some good old tender spinach kind of going through. I'm going to chop it up so I don't have any super big, long, stringy pieces. And that way it will go in nicely for it. And then we're going to add in our fresh herbs. But the spinach really, you don't get so much of a flavor component because the fresh spices and the herbs are going to go on, but it will give you a lot of that green in there, which will show up nicely when we do the wrapping. So I'm going to mince this up here. And let's get those nice and around. And it's okay if you have a little bit of, some bigger ones, but just try to get it as chopped as well as possible. When we put it in there, they will shrink up and wilt some more. Here we go. So there we've got our chopped spinach. It's about, I would say, 2 cups or so. And it's not perfectly, chopped, but enough to where the majority of it will, you're not going to have big, long strings of spinach. Give this a nice little toss. I'm going to just turn my temperature down to about a 4. We'll mix that in there. And I will say, it smells so delicious. Okay, we'll let that saute. And let's get some of our fresh herbs. We're going to use a lot because, pork is one of those meats that, definitely benefits from a lot of great fresh flavors and a lot of seasoning. So we've got a good amount of rosemary. I'm going to put in this is going to be about a tablespoon of fresh rosemary. Now, if you can use dried herbs on this, you're just going to have to minimize the amount that you're going to use because dried herbs have a bit more kind of kick to them, a little bit stronger in flavor because they're essentially more of it per the amount, but they've been dehydrated. We've got some fresh sage here. I'm going to just take off some of these nice leaves. Sage is that nice fuzzy herb, but it will give you this really nice earthy flavor. I picked up some sage because we're also going to be making some lamb dishes this week. And sage and lamb, I feel like they're a happy couple. They just work really well together. Some fresh thyme and then fresh oregano. We're going to pull off these leaves as best we can. This is always the part about working with fresh herbs that isn't as fun is the getting all of them off their little twigs. And that's just simply like, yes, you could leave some of the more tender of the twigs in, but you'll get that texture, that rougher, chewy, sticky-like texture. Okay. A couple good ones. I'm going to get a few more in here, and then oregano. There we go. So I'll have about a tablespoon of pretty much each of these fresh herbs in there, on there. And I will say, if you don't like a certain herb or stuff, like you can always cut that out. Just do what you like. There's no rule that you have to use every herb. And a lot of people will stick with just the basics, onions and garlic to begin with, and then slowly move on.
How was the brunch today?
Oh, it was delicious. It was simple but delicious. And although it was really funny, Torrin, my my 14-year-old son, he was like, you know what was missing from this omelet, Mom? He goes, I could really use some sweet peppers. And I'm like, of course you would. Of course you would like sweet peppers, and you would give me that comment that you needed some sweet peppers in there. But it was really delicious. The boys all ate it really well. My girls, you know them, they're always the more challenging ones. You know, they ate the muffins and the potatoes and stuff like that. Well, not Evie. Evie did not eat the potatoes, but after her soccer practice this morning, I took her to Starbucks, which, she is a great lover of all of my kids. And I have to say, my children have a Starbucks issue, and that was started because me. I do love good old Starbucks. When my littlest ones, like Jackie doesn't quite know the menu yet, but when Teddy is like, oh, get me this and get me that, and I'm like, you shouldn't know the Starbucks menu at 4 years old. Give this a good stir. And then let's get these fresh herbs minced up. So you can see we've got quite the bundle of fresh herbs here. We're going to mince it up nicely. We'll toss it into our spinach, and then we'll throw in a little bit of garlic, salt, and pepper to season it up, and then we'll put this inside our pork. I'll have that going. And
You got a question? What's in the skillet so far?
so in the skillet, we have sauteed up onions, fresh garlic, and spinach. And then we're about to add in this lovely bundle of fresh herbs, which is rosemary, thyme, oregano, and sage. So these are going to be all of the wonderful flavors that are really going to make the pork tenderloin pop. And the nice thing is they're going to help keep it nice and juicy too and flavorful.
What's your favorite drink at Starbucks?
My favorite drink at Starbucks, there's a couple, and it just depends what time of the year is. So I really love the green tea, like the matcha frappuccino. I know it's like a weird one, although they've changed their recipe a little bit, so it's not exactly what you order. I have to change it to make it back to how it used to taste. I have very discerning taste when it comes to it, but that is my favorite. Probably my favorite is the one. It's the one I always ask for my birthday and whatnot, because it's like a dessert. It's like a milkshake. It's so good. But I do love, during the fall, I like to get the chai tea with oat milk and pumpkin spice, like the pumpkin spice syrup on it. I don't actually like coffee. So there is no coffee in any of my drinks. They're all like the bougie drinks. And then I really like the mango dragon fruit refresher with water, no lemonade. Those are like my three that I absolutely love. Now, sometimes my kids, apparently there's these trends on these like super, like 15,000 ingredient drinks. And they'll be like, Mom, will you order this? And I'm like, I will only order this through the app, because I am not going to read off a crazy list and be like, I need this, this, and this, and this, but I'll add it on the app for it. But they've made some of those that have been pretty good. Let's see. Still needs another minute or two. Okay. Let's get this. And, before I get my hands all on that, let's season this up, and then we can let that kind of sit. I'm going to put a little bit of garlic salt. We're going to season up. This has got to season up both pork. So I'm using a good amount of garlic salt, but that's because that's going to seep into the pork and everything on there. And then a little bit of pepper. Okay. Give this a nice little base here. Okay. And then I'm going to turn this off, and we'll just let that sit there. And then we're going to work on filleting up our chicken. But all right, let me wash my hands. I got a little bit of garlic on it, and it's making my hand slip.
Can you go over what pork roulade is again?
It is a pork tenderloin that we're going to fillet out into a sheet, and then we'll fill it with our seasoned up spinach and herbs, fresh herbs and garlic here, and onions, and then we'll roll it up and tie it into like a little back into its shape. And then when you cut, it will have a swirl in it.
You're putting the spinach in the pork?
You won't be able to taste the spinach. He's afraid. The spinach is purely a color, a decorative, because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't get the pretty green squirrel. It has no flavor. Remember, I always tell him, I said, do you remember the first time I made beef Wellington? I had chopped up spinach and mushrooms in there, and he thought it was the most delicious thing ever. Okay. Now, the trick is with these is sometimes you get the funky ones that don't want to cut so well with it, but we're going to work on there. You're going to essentially start making a slice through, not right in the middle, but on one edge, because we are going to be filleting this. So we're going to have to roll it midway through. It may seem like a daunting task, but it's not as hard as you think for it on there. And I will say sometimes the bigger, thicker ones are a little bit easier to do because they're not as awkward shaped, but you can still do it with these cheaper ones on there. And look at this. This should be enough to allow me to fillet it out. You've got this nice thin piece of meat here. So it's not just cutting it in half. You don't cut it in half. You're essentially cutting it on like a 3/4, and then you're gonna roll it up. So I'm gonna look at my meat and see where the best starting point is. And then I kind of pick there. So because I have funky angles here, we're gonna start right here. But you see, I'm not starting in the middle. I'm starting right here, and I'm not cutting all the way through. You're kind of cutting, and then you're gonna cut down most of the way, and then you're gonna turn almost like you're making like, a corkscrew, like a little maze that you're going down and like a nice little swirl through. And then we'll cut a little bit more on here. And then kind of roll it in a little bit more. And that way when we do it, we can roll it right back up. And then a little bit more. And looks like we're pretty good timing here. I'm just going to cut that one out so that we can have our thing. So we should have our nice little base here. Again, nice, long, skinny piece that we can stuff up and roll on there. Okay, I'm going to wash my hands, and then we're going to go take the lid off of our sourdough. And then I should be able to do, our noodles should be ready, so we can take those out as well. And then we'll get these guys rolled up and seared. Here, get my hands dry. Get my little kitties on. Meow. Oh, yeah. And we've got our sourdough that we've been baking for 20 minutes at 500. We're going to take the lid off. Look at our beautiful little bake here. I just like to slide that out. Nice little pop and wonderful. My husband would like to remind you guys that he did the stretch and folds on this loaf, which is why he thinks it's, turned out excellent. Okay, we're going to turn the oven down to 450, and then we'll bake for another 20 minutes. And that will give us a nice kind of golden brown look to it. Okay, let's get our noodles strained, and then we will make, we'll finish up with these roulades so that we can stuff them, tie them, sear them off, and pop them in the oven. So let's get this guy going. And give it a good shake. And then I'll just have it strain right on here. Have it rest right here. Okay. For this, use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, just like I do with all things. And this is just going to help keep these nice and juicy inside. So we're going to kind of just give it a little bit of a drizzle. You can also do lemon juice if you wanted to do a nice lemony herb. That works well for it. But we're going to just give it a good wrap around. Got a little bit of garlic salt. Just a little bit extra. And then let's get our base in here. Now I'm keeping this really simple with just our kind of our spinach and herb in there, and then our onions. But again, you can do so many different things can go in this. We'll spread it all out, but I'm just going to first scrape it all on here for both of them. But you can add cheese, nuts, sun-dried tomatoes on there, but I'm keeping mine, again, more of just a very herby base to it. Very simple. And then once I have them on there, I'll spread it out, but I just want to get all of it. And then we'll sear them off real quick in our pan, and then they'll go into the oven to finish up cooking. And these do not take very long to cook up after you seared them off, which is also another nice thing about it. Okay. So, and it is warm, but not too hot to where you can't touch it. Now I say that, and my husband would be like, "That's so hot."
I don't sound like that.
That's what he claims. Okay. Now we're going to roll these up. You're going to find the one to be the best way to roll it. I always find if the thicker side you have it, we'll just roll it up like this. And then when we're done, I will tie it with my like cooking twine. I'm just going to see which one. That one's the nicer one. So essentially you're rolling it back up to where it goes back into the shape that you cut it off with.
You have a question. What kind of meat is that?
This is pork tenderloin. So they're just like 1 pound little logs of pork tenderloin. It's a great way to jazz up a really inexpensive meat, and gives you just something a little bit different. You don't need a lot of crazy cooking skills to do it, or knife skills. You just have to practice and you'll get it there. I say, sometimes it can be a little tricky cutting through, but once you've done it, like the first round, it's easier. I'm probably going to use about 4. This is cooking twine for each one. Now, you don't have to use cooking twine. You could probably use a toothpick to hold it together if you don't have it, but I find that the twine just works a little bit better.
Lily sent you a cowboy hat, I must say.
Yeehaw. Well, thank you, Lily. We appreciate that. Let's get these guys. They don't have to be perfect. I'm not wrapping a present here. I'm just cutting them all up so that I have them on it. And then I'm just going to use 4 for each one to have it. And we're just going to essentially tie it around each one, just like this. And then when you're done, you'll just, tie it off, or like cut them off when you're cooking. Just like, with roasts and whatnot, if you've, ever used a boneless roast and they've got it, tied up, this is essentially the same thing. And this is just going to hold all of this deliciousness together. No specialty knots, just a good old tie. And I always say, just cut all your string at one time so that you're not going back and forth.
Paula sent you again.
Well, thank you, Paula. We appreciate that.
And can you go over what the filling is?
Yes. So I made just an herby base filling using minced onions, fresh garlic, spinach, and then lots of fresh herbs. So we have sage, thyme, oregano, and rosemary, and we minced those all up. So it's just going to have just this wonderful flavor. And then we had 4 tablespoons of butter in there that will, again, give a nice, wonderful flavor. After we filleted it, we rubbed it with a little bit of Worcestershire, which has a natural acidity in it, which will help break away the natural fat in there, and it will leave it nice and tender. Okay. Get these guys, my hands washed up. And then what I'm going to do is we are just going to pan sear this really quick right back into this herby plate. And then we'll put it on a baking sheet and then we'll bake them up on here. I'm going to put a little bit more butter. You could do olive oil if you want, butter tastes better. And we're going to use a good amount because, again, we've got 2 big fillets here that we want to saute. So once those are nice and sauteed, or the butter's melted, I'll drop them in. We'll do a high heat sear on the outside of each one, and then we'll pop it in there. I'm going to slide this right over here so that we can work on our soup. We're going to make a mushroom soup, so let's get our onions going for that. And then we will get our mac and cheese ready and our broccoli and everything kind of cooked up. So we're going to do essentially like a creamy mushroom soup. I'm just going to use Baby Bella's, but this is one of those soups that if I have chanterelle mushrooms, I will use chanterelle mushrooms because I love them. But this year, Costco did not have their cases of chanterelle mushrooms, which is always sad because it's one of those bougie ingredients that they typically bring out like October to December-ish until they're like completely sold out. And they did not have them this year, so I don't know if there's a shortage or whatnot. But I was a little bit sad. And I searched high and low, and they were not there. So maybe it was just here. For our soup, I'm going to do kind of long, stringy ones in there because it's going to have a nice caramelized mushroom, onion, and garlic base for this soup. It's very simple, but delicious. And we're going to use a vegetable bouillon and then some heavy cream for it on here. We'll get this going. Our butter is almost nice and toasty, just a little bit left before we sear off our little pork tenderloins, and then we'll pop them in there. Let me get this up here, and I'm going to actually bring this right down here. We can get that heating up. And we'll get our our onions cooking off first. Okay, looks like our butter is all melted. I'm going to give this a nice little swirl. We then want it nice and hot so that we can sear these off on both sides. Let's grab my pan a little bit more on the burner. Luckily with these, I can kind of give them a nice turn and they'll fit in my pan. I don't have to keep them completely square or like straight for it. But we'll sear them off, and then I'm going to put them on my baking sheet. Just a pretty high, and this is just to develop a really lovely crust. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I find it gives you a nicer texture, a nicer coloring, and a little bit better flavor, and it kind of seals in that moisture a little bit. But we'll just flip it over and do just a kind of a high heat sear on both sides.
Do you have a question? You ever get stressed when you're cooking that you're not going to be able to get everything done?
No, I try to plan it out as much when I'm doing one thing at a time. Now, sometimes when I'm making like my big holiday feasts or whatnot, sometimes I'll misjudge things and then things can, go on there. But most of the time, I will say I can get it there. Now, I have been asked to like kind of cater a couple of things, and sometimes that can be stressful because I'm like, oh, I can get this done. And I always shortcut myself by like an hour. And I always am like, okay, next time, remember, you need an hour more time to do it. There we go. So look at that beautiful, nice little sear on it.
And how many people do you feed on average?
On average, I feed between 7 and 9. Tonight we're feeding 9 on there for our like things. But we also have like our nieces and nephews here a lot. So those are 2 more mouths on there. So sometimes up to 11, but little mouths don't always equate to being the same as one big person mouth. Although some of our big people mouths eat a lot, depending on what it is. If it's steak, they eat a lot. If it's a veggie soup, they eat lightly. There we go. Get our onions going. And then once that's seared off, we'll get that on there. I'm going to start slicing up our mushrooms so that we'll have our mushrooms ready to go in there for this. I've got a bunch of Baby Bellas, and I'm just going to do a nice thin slice. We've got a little over a pound of mushrooms here. You can definitely use pre-sliced, but when you slice them yourself, I can go a lot thinner, which means I'm going to get a better saute on them and a lot more flavor. and they stay fresh longer. And I will say, whole mushrooms are typically, on average, cheaper than sliced mushrooms.
And what brand is your knife?
This is a Woodstock Classic brand, and I have had this knife for going on almost 17 years. So it was a wedding present from my siblings. All went in together to get me a nice Woodstock knife set for my wedding. And I will say it stood the test of time. They are all great knives. I've never had to buy another knife since then. Except the one of my knives that my kids threw out in the pizza box. Other than that, but I love them. The Woodstock makes the classic one, which is my favorite. They have a good heft to it, but they have a more affordable one, which is called the Gourmet, which kind of is interesting because you would think, oh, gourmet fancy. It's not. It's their more affordable one. And the main difference, they're both very, very sharp knives, but the main difference is that it is, look at that beautiful sear on it, is it's a lot lighter, so it doesn't have as much of a heft. Okay, pop this on here. We're gonna go pop these in the oven. I'm gonna give a little bit of this drizzle of this herby butter over the top of it. There we go. And I'll just set this to cool right here for a second. Let's go pop this in the oven on there. But that flavor from all that butter and the meat searing, I poured back onto it because, again, pork can be if not cooked right, can be a very dry meat. But we're going to make it lovely and delicious. We're going to slide this. I'm going to just move this one over just a smidge. I'll go wash my hands. I'm just going to slide it right under there. That's going to protect it from some direct heat, and we'll get our sourdough out. But that's going to need about 15 or so minutes to cook up. We seared it off. It's, again, not a very thick pork tenderloin, so you don't need to cook it for too long. And the one thing you don't want to do is overcook it. Okay. We are done with this pan.
Do you ever bake your mac and cheese?
I'm going to bake it onto this. So yes, I like to bake it to get that nice little golden kind of syrup on it. That cheese melt on it, which is the best part of it. So we are going to bake it here in just a second. I'm going to start making a roux for it because we're going to do the one where we make a Mornay sauce, and then we'll add in our noodles after that. So essentially we're going to make a roux, then a bechamel, then a Mornay.
And what temp is the pork cooking at?
It is at 450 because that is what my oven is for my sourdough. But when I take it out, I'm going to bring it down to 400. But being directly underneath the Dutch oven is going to prevent it from getting direct heat, so it won't be quite as hot as it. But typically I would bake it at a 400 for about 20 minutes. We can cut off a little bit of time because it's a little bit higher in there, but then I will turn it down once we pull out that sourdough. And it's one of those things that you can do a little bit higher, you can do a little bit lower for either one, depending on what you're baking. It's one of those that it can work with you. Let's get these guys all diced up. Okay. So I've got our mushrooms sliced up and ready for ours once our onions get a nice caramelization on here. I'm going to melt my butter in here. For our noodles, I'm going to say we're going to use about maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter to make our mac and cheese on there. So just pinch off a little bit. I'm going to let this start to melt on a low temperature. I don't want it to be too high. Our onions are getting a nice good caramelization, which is perfect. That's going to add a nice richness to the broth to our soup. Now I don't like to call it a cream of mushroom soup because whenever I think of cream of mushroom soup, I think of the canned stuff, but it is similar to a cream of mushroom soup. I'm not going to add flour to my soup because I prefer a smoother, creamier, thinner base soup than that, but you're going to get a lot of that same flavor on there from it. but not a cream of mushroom soup. Because I just think of, all I can think about is the canned ones that, are in every casserole. We're going to mince up some garlic here. And I'm not going to puree or anything like this. It's going to have the chunks of mushrooms in it. And we're going to let them saute for a good while to bring out their flavor. Then we'll add in our broth and our cream for it. There we go. We'll toss this garlic in real quick. Let it saute up before we add in our mushrooms.
You have a question, what cheeses are you using?
I have a variety of cheddar. So I've got a white sharp cheddar, I've got a smoked sharp cheddar, and then I've got a sharp orange cheddar. So a little bit different. They'll all be so it's a triple cheddar one. They all have different kind of flavors to it, which will add a nice base to it. It just depends. Sometimes I make like a Gouda mac or like an Italian cheese mac. Just depends what I'm kind of craving and feeling like today.
So you admit that cheddar is better?
I do not admit that cheddar is better. I admit that cheddar is a delicious cheese, but not always better. Would you want cheddar on your pizza? No, you wouldn't.
Maybe.
No, you wouldn't. So it is not always better. It depends on the situation. There we go. Your cheese danishes. Would you want it with cheddar cheese or cream cheese? I would think I would want it with cream cheese, but I'll make you your cheddar cheese danishes. See, you always got to find a way to win. I found my way to win. Okay. Let's get our butters almost ready here, and then we're going to add in our flour, and then we'll add in some milk and some cream for it. But our garlic is just about there. Let's add in our mushrooms so we can get this kind of going on here. There's a good amount of mushrooms on here, but we'll get them nice and toasted up, and they will make a delicious base for our soup. They will shrink down quite a lot. So they'll come down to about half this size. So while it may seem super full right now, they will disappear. I'm going to coat them up. I'm not going to add any salt on them yet. I want them to saute by themselves in here for a good while before I help them out in releasing their natural juices. Just allows them to bring out their flavors a little bit nicer. It's a good saute on them. Okay.
Beauty, since you get the masquerade mess.
Oh, well, thank you. We appreciate that. I'm going to turn this down really low so that when I'm making my bechamel or my roux and then my bechamel and then my Monet, we will do it there. I'm going to grab some milk out of the fridge. Since I used about 2.5, 3 tablespoons of flour, I'm going to use, or butter, I'm going to use equal parts of the flour to make this. Let's see. Which will be just under 1/4 cup. And then I'll whisk it and then I'll see where it looks. So when you add your flour and butter together, this is called a roux. And this is your base for a lot of sauces, gravies, gumbo. And so it's really simple basis. It's just butter and flour and let it, cook for a little bit. So I'm going to let this sit here for about a minute while we go grab our sourdough out of the oven. And then we will turn our oven heat down to 400. So let's get these guys out. I'm going to just cancel this off and turn it to 400 right away. That way I don't forget about it. There we go. And then opening this up. That's from our little butter crisping up over there. But look at this, how gorgeous it looks right under there. I'm just going to keep it down on my lower shelf on there. But that smokiness is just from the butter heating up on the pan. It's in the pan and not the bottom of my oven. Okay, this is the sourdough for this. We're going to take it out so it has time to cool. Look at that gorgeous pop here. I like a nice blonde crust on here, but look at this little peak here, this lovely expansion, nice golden brown. Have that resting right there with sourdough bread. It needs to sit for about 5 to 10 minutes before you cut into it to let the steaming come off so that you don't have a gummy sourdough on there. In about 5 or so minutes, 5-10 minutes, we will take our pork tenderloins out of the oven and let them sit for a few. But by then, we should have our mac and cheese in the oven and going. Okay, we've had our roux cooking for about a minute, so we've got our butter in here. You want it to develop its flavor for about a minute or so, so don't directly add in your milk right away. There we go. And you're going to use probably about 3 cups of milk. I'm going to use the milk and then some cream at the very end to add a nice bit of thickness to it. I'm going to turn up my heat now to about a 4 or 5. And I'm just going to add little by little until I get to the thickness that I want on here. So I'm not using precise measurements, but typically when you're making, going to a bechamel like this, it's about, for every tablespoon of butter to flour, you're going to use about a cup of liquid. We're going to whisk it to bring it into smooth, and then we will add in our cheese in here in just a second. I'm going to add in a little bit more and bring that up. I'll let that simmer for a second, and then we're going to start grating our cheeses. There we go. I'm going to give my mushrooms a toss because we'll make our broth for it at the very end, but sautéing the mushrooms is where all that flavor for your soup comes in. And so you don't want to rush this phase. You can see how much they're shrinking down already for it. Get some of those that are hiking up the sides and push them down. There we go. Perfect. For it. And then I'm going to just slide it there. So while this is heating up and just giving it a second to thicken up, then I will we'll grate some of our cheese. Let's start off with our simple cheddar that we have. This is just a sharp yellow cheddar. I always like to include a yellow cheddar in my mac and cheese because when I'm doing a cheddar mac, because it adds that pop of orange color to it, but also using just white cheddars are great as well. So we'll grate this up. When making homemade mac and cheese, whenever possible, use freshly grated cheese because that cheese is going to melt and be a lot creamier than pre-grated. Pre-grated has an anti-caking agent on it, which prevents it from like melting together during like transportation and whatnot. Okay, we got to pay the cheese tax to the cameraman. He gets the little nubs. Let's get our bechamel here. So we started out with a roux, which is our butter and our flour. Adding milk to it makes it a bechamel. You can also add in nutmeg if you like that little, pop of sweetness to it. I'm not a big fan of it, so I don't put it in, but you can definitely add that in. And then when we add cheese, you take your bechamel and you turn it into a Mornay sauce, which is the base for American mac and cheese. Just funny, different terms. Here is our smoked cheddar, which is a bit sharper of a cheddar, which means it's going to crumble a little bit more than it is going to be soft. Yellow cheese typically, as you can see, it's crumbling already, is a softer, so it's been aged less. But this will have a nice kind of slightly smoky flavor to it, which will be wonderful. And as long as you get them down fairly small, you should be good. It's when you leave big chunks is the problem. Crumble those up a little bit, and then get about, it should be good for right now. And let's get this a good whisk. And then let's get some of our last sharp cheddar cheese in here. And this one's a softer one, so not a super sharp edge. I, again, like to have a little bit smoother cheeses, gives you a slightly more creamy melt to it, but the sharper cheeses give you that stronger flavor. So there's a turn-off. So it's great to mix your ages to where you have some sharp with some of the creamier, smoother ones. That way you have a good base, because if you stick with all the sharp, super aged cheddar cheeses, you will have a slightly, not as smooth of a mac and cheese. Okay, should be a good starting point. We're gonna mix, so here's our base of our sauce. You can see we've got a nice thickness to it. I'm gonna add a little bit of cream now, which will give it a nice, slightly richer, creamier base to it than just milk. But we don't need much, but a little bit is just gonna bring a bit more flavor in. And then we're gonna add in part of our cheddar cheese, or orange, part of our white cheddar, and then part of our smoked cheddar. And then we're going to whisk this together. Again, keep your temperatures nice and low. That way we'll have a good kind of base for it.
Marla, since you get.
Well, thank you, Marla. We appreciate this. And then we're going to put our noodles in, and then we'll add the rest of our cheese on top for it. And then we'll pop this in the oven to kind of melt and pop up. We'll pull our pork tenderloin out because that should be just about ready on there. And then we'll kind of finish up with everything. You want your pork tenderloin to sit for about 5 to 10 minutes once you come out, so that those natural juices will like seal into your meat, versus if you try to cut it, as soon as you take it out, all of the juices will seep out, and that will leave you with a very dry pork tenderloin. So let it sit there. Let's get this mixed in. I'm going to turn off my heat now on there, and we'll give it a good toss. Beautiful. I'm going to add just a pinch of garlic salt for a little bit of flavoring, about a teaspoon, but you don't need to add too much because the cheese is going to make it already salty. There, look how wonderful and creamy this is already. Turn that heat off. And then I'm going to add in a bits of my cheese just to mix it on underneath. Gives you a nice little cheese pull, and then we'll put the rest on top. Okay. So good amount of cheese in here. I'm going to mix this up a little bit so that we can kind of sprinkle it over the top.
Can you go over what you did for the mac and cheese?
Yes. So we boiled off our noodles. Then we made a roux using about 3 tablespoons of butter and 3 tablespoons of flour. Then we added in about 3 cups of milk with about 1/4 cup of heavy cream. Mixed that until we had a nice thick bechamel sauce. And then we added in our shredded cheese and a little bit of garlic salt. Okay, let's get this going over here. And we're going to pop this in the oven. This just needs to be in there until it melts up. Let's see, we're going to probably have a little bit of a smoke from that butter. Not too bad. Beautiful. I'm going to take our pork roulade out, and we're going to let it sit and just continue to kind of cook internally, just like you let your meats rest. We'll tent it to kind of seal in that moisture, but we don't want to cut into it yet. I think that's always a lot of people's biggest mistakes, is when they cook something like a meat or a steak and they will cut into it right away. But when we did this is our pork tenderloins that we filleted out. Then we added our herby based in there with spinach, onions, garlic, sage, rosemary, thyme, and oregano. Rolled it up, we tied it, and then we seared it off with our butter and our pan in there. I'm always going to tent it in here to seal in that moisture and that heat, but you want it to sit for 5 to 10 minutes before you cut into it. That way, that moisture, it has a chance for the meat to settle and to stay into it. And by then, we should be done with everything else. Okay. We have our mushrooms. I'm going to give them a little bit of salt right now. And then we're going to start adding in our liquid. and let this simmer. And then we've got our garlic, our broccoli going, which will be just almost ready. So we're going to get about a tablespoon of butter in for our broccoli because we'll do a quick little pan sear on it. Let's clean up a little bit of this mess. And then we have our mac and cheese baking at 400. And that, because I'm not doing an air fry, might take a little bit longer to bake up. So it should be ready when everything else is done. Let's shake this off a little bit. Get our butter and a little bit of our broccoli going here. So I'm going to mince up some garlic for our broccoli. It's actually a mixture of broccoli and broccolini because I had a little bit of both. And I was like, you know what? They're close enough together in the same family that we can just combine them as one veggie dish tonight. So we're just going to do like a sauteed garlic broccoli-ish, you know. It's so funny. I love broccolini more. My kids and husbands love broccoli more because they say it's easier to eat broccoli. It has less stalk. And I'm like, but the stalk part of broccolini is so delicious. And they're all, but I swear, they eat their broccoli like dinosaurs eat them, like little leaves off of the tree. Let's add in, for our mushroom soup, I'm going to add in about a cup at first. And we're going to just scrape the bottom of this pan to kind of bring up. I'm not sure if I'm going to use all 4 cups of water, but we'll see. And then we're going to add in a scoop of vegetable bouillon for this. But a good scrape. But you see how it already has such a rich color to the base of it. And that is just from the mushrooms and really giving them a chance to saute. And just scrape off the bottom as we go. There we go. And then we will be adding cream as well, but not until the end. If you add your cream too soon, you can get it to kind of split in your soup, and it won't be as nice of a texture. Okay, I think we'll actually use all 4 cups. Yep. There we go. And again, I'm scraping the bottom of this pot so that all of those little drippings from both the caramelized onions, garlic, and the mushrooms are in here. And then we're going to do a nice scoop of our vegetable bouillon.
Yeah, but was that just water?
It was just water. We're going to add in some vegetable bouillon right now to get kind of that nice flavor. You could also use chicken bouillon or even beef bouillon. I find with the mushroom soup, the vegetable is the nicest because it has that kind of roast kind of veggies that really plays along with the caramelized mushrooms and onions. So we're giving a nice big heaping spoonful in here. And that should season up. We're going to also add in some fresh thyme in here as well. And then a little bit of pepper. But mainly it's that caramelized mushroom and onion base to it. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. You could add in a little bit of wine too, like a red wine or a white wine. Either one would work. The Worcestershire sauce gives it a little bit of acidity to it, which works out well. I'm going to say about a tablespoon or so. Okay. Our garlic is about toasted and nicely. I'm giving it a good swirl around on here. Let's get this, and then we're going to check out our mac and cheese. We'll get these sauteing up and out of here, and then we'll be about ready to serve up because I think our pork's been sitting for about 5 minutes right now. So it's got about 5 minutes left, and then we're ready, which is perfect because that's about as long as we're going to need to serve these guys up. Get all of it. Yes. So this is my mixture of broccoli and broccolini for this. So a little of both. They're same family. We're going to give them a nice little toss here with our tongs. And then I'm going to put my lid on to steam it. And then we'll coat it with a little bit of Parmesan cheese towards the end. But coat it up with that butter and that garlic, that crispy garlic on there, which will be lovely. Beautiful. And then we're going to, just the natural moisture from the steam, once we put the lid on, we'll bring that together. There we go. Have that down. And let's get a nice taste on our sauce here, our soup. See what we need to add to it. And I know we're going to add cream in it more, but see if we need to add. We got to add our fresh thyme. I know that. It's already really delicious. Let's get our fresh thyme. And for this, I'm not going to mince it up. I'm adding in the full leaves of it so that it's a bit more mellow in the flavoring for it. But we're just going to kind of pull it off from our little twigs like this and add that fresh thyme in. It's going to be about a teaspoon of fresh thyme. Now you can always use dried thyme if you have it. If I was going to use dried thyme, I'd use just about a half a teaspoon because dried thyme is a bit stronger. Here we go. Okay, and then we can go check on our mac and cheese, see how it's bubbling up, and take that out if it's ready. We'll finish up our soup by adding a little bit of cream in there, and let's check. Ooh, just about. We're almost at that nice bubbly edge. I'm going to let it sit for just a few more minutes. That way it gets a nice hot bubble, and that way when we're done with our soup, I'll grab it out real quick. I'm going to switch it right here to air fryer mode, which is going to give you a nice high heat, which means it should be done in about 2-3 minutes. And then we'll be ready to serve up our delicious Sunday dinner here.
Do you have a question on what type of soup?
This is going to be a creamy mushroom soup, where right now we've got our baby bellows in there with some onions and garlic that we've caramelized up and some vegetable broth. We sauteed them until they were nice and golden brown and had a lovely bit of juices to it. Okay, we can see our broccoli is getting this nice kind of bright green color to it from its nice self-steaming process. Let's see. For our soup now, this is kind of where my cream of mushroom soup's a little bit different than a lot of, is because I don't do a really thick flour base to it. I just do a nice cream and mushroom and like the mushroom broth base. But I'm going to add in here I had about a half a cup of cream right there. And just a little bit of cream, as you can see, is going to go a long way into making this such a rich and wonderful soup. But I like mine thinner. I don't like it super thick and gelatinous. I like a nice creamy based soup. Let's give this. Delicious. And with that simmer, I'm going to grate my Parmesan cheese, and then we can grab our mac and cheese out of the oven and cut up our remoulade that have been doing their nice little sit. So very important again with your thing. I think a lot of people like to rush I'm going to give a little bit of butter in here. Rush their meat. Don't just cut into it right away. Just like if you're Thanksgiving turkey or Christmas roast, you don't cut into it right away. You let it sit, and that's just going to give you a nice, more juicy and tender meat. And I will say with pork tenderloin, that is one where you definitely want to let it sit. Okay, here's our broccoli and broccolini. We're going to give it a nice little dusting of garlic salt wherever I put that. It's hiding from me right now. Haha. Okay, so a little sprinkle of garlic salt over the top to flavor these up, and then a little bit of Parmesan, because garlic, Parmesan, broccoli is the best. We're going to put our lid on. We'll steam that up. I'm going to slide this out of the way. We can go grab our mac and cheese now. And I'm gonna get ready to serve up here. Put my milk back in the fridge. Bring this down to a low simmer. And as I said, it won't take long for this to get our nice bubble on it, and it already has this beautiful crust. And that's what you want, that just perfect, nice little bubble on it. Now, for some people, they love to put breadcrumbs. If you're gonna do breadcrumbs, you just kind of toss your breadcrumbs into a little bit of butter and garlic salt and sprinkle it over the top. My kids love a simple cheese layer on it, so we keep it simple here. But there's our mac and cheese. I'm gonna grab my roulade that is sitting nice. You can see the steam just coming off the top of it. So that's what I'm saying. You just let it heat up. And it's just going to seal in that moisture and is wonderful. Tent it, that keeps the moisture in as well. I'm going to bring these guys over here. And
do you post your recipes anywhere?
We post the videos to all of our lives on the link on our page. So you can definitely watch and recreate our recipes from that. I do send out recipe cards a couple times a month for our members, but you can always rewatch those videos. And I am working on a cookbook right now, so hopefully that will be ready sooner rather than later. Give this a nice little stir. Beautiful. We've got that. You can see I'm going to turn this off. We've got our Parmesan cheese is melted. And I'm going to get cutting board out so we can take these remoulades out and we can cut them, or I'll cut one at a time for this. Leave this right over here and have this one ready for eating. We'll just cut off, again, this is our string, our cooking twine. And I'm just going to cut off part of it right now. Go get a quick little rinse off the fresh garlic off my knife. And we'll get ready to plate this up in just a second. Beautiful. Here we go. So this, you can see in there that nice, that herby roll in our meat, and it's just wonderful and delicious. It's going to flavor it up so wonderfully on there. And they are cooked beautifully and juicy and delicious. Okay, I got our mac and cheese. We can bring our sourdough over. And let me grab my tongs. And we'll be ready to serve up here. This mac and cheese, I gotta remember it is hot. And let me grab a little bowl for our soup and my ladle. Okay, guys, let's start. I'm gonna start with my soup over here and then we can bring it up there. For dinner tonight, we have our creamy mushroom soup made with baby bella, caramelized onions, garlic, fresh thyme, and a creamy vegetable-based broth that it just has so much flavor and is just wonderful. We are going to be serving it with our pork remoulade. Here, I've got a nice here. We have this seasoned with our spinach fresh herb base with just garlic, onion, rosemary, thyme, oregano, and sage. We've got our nice, look at this beautiful triple cheddar mac and cheese. So we've got orange cheddar, sharp cheddar, and smoked cheddar in there for just a wonderful, ooey gooey, delicious, cheesy mac and cheese. And then our garlic, parmesan, broccoli, and broccolini on here for a nice pop of a vegetable. And then, of course, we will have a slice of our homemade sourdough bread to go with it for just a great, simple, but delicious Sunday dinner. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate some of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made, our pork remoulade, or not remoulade, roulade, and our wild mushroom soup and mac and cheese. And you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my hex cod pans, my Dutch ovens, my knives, cutting boards, all the different things that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.